Funding for this program is provided by the Fred A. and Barbara M. Erb Family Foundation and by
The Consumers Energy Foundation is committed to serving Michigan, from preserving our state's natural resources and sustaining our future, to continuing business growth, academic achievement, and community involvement. Learn more at consumersenergy.com/foundation.
additional funding by the Richard C. Devereaux Foundation, Eve and Jerry Young, the Polk Family Fund, and by
Fresh, clean water. Is there any resource on Earth more important for human life?
Fresh, potable water is the most valuable commodity in the world. It's more valuable than gold, it's more valuable than oil, it's more valuable than diamonds. Civilizations have risen and fallen based on their access to it.
We have 20% of the fresh water drinking supply in the entire world. The Great Lakes are looked at very enviously by many.
And with access to that incredible volume of fresh water comes the responsibility of not just stewardship, but protection from perceived threats, both from outside and inside the Great Lakes Basin.
I would be concerned about anything that diverted fresh water from the Great Lakes and depleted our resources in any way.
The bottled water industry in the state of Michigan accounts for a fraction of percent of the water use in the state. So collectively, all the water bottlers account for 0.01% of all the water use in the state.
The streams are drying up. When you go to the headwaters, you have these so-called monitors there, they claim the water is running at, some ridiculous amount, 200 gallons per minute. And what we find is a puddle with stagnant water in it.
When you look at this as a whole and look at what's happening as a result of the overuse of the aquifer, we came to the conclusion that the Great Lakes was the only reasonable water supply for the residents of the city of Waukesha.
Our utility manager went before our common council and told everybody that our deep aquifer is declining 5 to 9 feet per year, and it wasn't. Waukesha has known all along that our deep aquifer is increasing, not declining.
In 2008, after years of negotiations, the 8 governors of the Great Lakes states signed the Great Lakes Compact, a legally binding interstate agreement designed to manage water within the Great Lakes Basin.
So the compact at its heart is an agreement legally between the 8 states that says categorically there will be no wholesale diversions of water from the Great Lakes, with very small minor exceptions.
This year, single-serve bottled water surpassed carbonated beverages for the first time. So, our business is really driven by customer demand.
Nestle Waters North America, which is a subsidiary of the Swiss company Nestle, the largest food company in the world, in 2002 built its Ice Mountain bottled water facility in Stanwood, which is a community about 50 miles north of Grand Rapids.
We visited Nestle's bottling operation in Michigan. Factory manager Dave Summer gave us a tour of his facility.
We've been here since 2002, sustainably since 2002. We've got 280 local employees that work here. We've got 10 production lines. We kind of look at everything from the 8 ounce to 2.5 gallon. On average, we're probably right around 4 million bottles a day, which would be the half-liter size.
Many people don't understand where the water comes from. Can you just succinctly explain the water we're surrounded by here in these big cases, the Ice Mountain water, where does it come from?
Well, it's groundwater that comes from, in this area, super thick sand and gravel aquifers.
Due to a provision in the law that allows any water in containers less than 5.7 gallons to be considered a product that can be sold, Nestle is exempt from diversion prohibitions in the Great Lakes Compact.
In our history, we've never had the sale of water. This is something new.
Who owns the water and who gets to use the water?
I've concluded that water is not owned by anybody. If anybody owns it, it is owned by each of our states as sovereigns.
Nestle has made headlines around the country as people try to reconcile the business model of withdrawing and then selling water. And in Michigan, it's no different.
Nestle draws water from 7 wells up in Waukesha and Osceola counties. A couple of them are wells that are owned by the city of Everett, and so they pay actually a fee to draw from those wells. But the spring water wells, they pay $200 a year to the state of Michigan to take water out of the springs and the aquifers.
Who made that deal?
That deal is made at the state level with the DEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality. It's built into state law.
What's important and what I think most people don't really understand is nobody pays for water in the state of Michigan. What we pay for if we get a water bill at your home or if you have a well at your house is you pay for the infrastructure and the cost of delivering that water to your home, which includes energy, infrastructure, distribution, labor. So for our cost here, just the capital investment to deliver water here to the plant has been about $267 million that we've invested in capital investment. The infrastructure that's here in Michigan is infrastructure that we own, that Nestle owns.
They have a groundwater well at Everett, and they have one at Twin and Chippewa Creeks, which is the subject of the day in the state of Michigan. Right now, Nestle has filed a permit to increase the 150 to 400 gallons per minute. 400 gallons per minute generally is too much.
Back in 2003, the water conservation group Michigan Citizens for Water Conservation sued Nestle, which was pumping 400 gallons per minute out of a well near Big Rapids. Jim Olson helped try the case against Nestle.
You can use water reasonably with your land, but if you divert it somewhere else off track, or you take it out of a watershed, you can't do it if it diminishes a wetlands, a stream, or a lake. And when we were done with the trial, Judge Root, the trial judge, issued an injunction and basically shut down all 3 wells.
Fall of 2016, they announced to the world a $36 million expansion of the Stanwood plant. Well, what was interesting about that is they made that announcement before they had all of the state permission that they needed, because the expansion was predicated on expanding the use of another well in Osceola County up to 400 gallons per minute, the disputed amount in that long-standing court battle. So it could be argued that they literally went just to another well and got the water that they wanted.
Meanwhile, Osceola Township denied a permit for Nestle to build a pipeline booster station from its well north of Everett to facilitate the 400 gallons per minute of pumping. Nestle sued Osceola Township in the summer of 2017. A judge was brought in from Ludington and in late December sided with Nestle, ordering the township to issue a zoning permit. The Osceola Board of Trustees voted to appeal the ruling, even though they had to crowdfund the $30,000 in legal fees in order to defend themselves in court. For now, Nestle can install the booster to be prepared to pump 400 gallons per minute near Everett.
I was surprised, I guess, at how the attitude had changed from before when they first came to town, where everybody was excited about them being here and wondering, where do I go to get a job?
In the small town of Everett, the diners are still where locals come to share the news of the day. And these days, the news is all about Nestle.
I brought photos of the Twin Creek that I live on, and I've lived there since I was 8.
Marianne Borden is one of many Everett residents who are not putting out the welcome mat for Nestle.
That creek had not changed in decades. And I was down there in February, and here are these big mud bars in the middle of this little creek with big, ugly grasses growing out of it and big trees that have arisen. That's a change, and that's caused by their pumping, I believe. I can't prove that, but it hadn't changed in decades until they started pumping from the well that's north of my house.
Of course, in Stanwood, opinions are different.
We put together a committee that if somebody's well went bad, we'd look into it and whatnot, between the health department, the township supervisors, and the plant. We've yet to have anybody come to our board and use that facility. They bring jobs to the community. They do generate a big tax base for us, for the county, township a little, but the biggest winners are the schools in the state. That's where your biggest share of your taxes go.
How best to manage Michigan's water remains a divisive topic, and recent water emergencies in the state have not made things easier for Nestle.
What is, I think, really egregious about the water issue is that it's groundwater that is being pumped at a very minimal cost to Nestle, and then they're shipping it either outside the Great Lakes Basin or even around within the basin itself, making a lot of money, and it just is sort of a head scratcher for people as to how they can do this. Meanwhile, you have many of our fellow citizens that are struggling to just pay their basic water bill, or they're suffering all kinds of problems, and you just kind of wonder about the efficacy of that type of situation.
You know, when we looked at Flint, we really focused on, you know, we wanted to focus on the children. We really did. We had an opportunity to spend with the local communities and the school system, so we wanted to donate there, and so we kind of focused with that. I think we plan to donate close to 1.5 million bottles. You know, I couldn't tell you the exact number that we've given today.
We could say more than 1 million bottles.
You know, I don't know the exact amount that we've donated to this point. You know, I think as they ask, it's that continual of when they need it, we're going to adjust for that.
What happens in a place like Flint, and this is what I worry about long term, long after the lead's gone from the water, and it will, the crisis will be solved here, people won't trust the water. And they will continue to drink bottled water, and it worries me because a guy named Peter Brabeck, who's the outgoing CEO of Nestle, not only makes all the money he makes from selling bottled water to places that don't have clean water coming out of their taps, he advises the UN on water policy in those countries. And so he says, privatize, privatize, privatize. Don't put your money into public systems. Don't build the pipes. Just give them my bottled water.
It's no risk.
Here in Flint, they're still having to pay their taxes on water they can't drink. You can see why at some point people would say, I don't want to pay taxes for it. I'm not drinking that water. I don't trust that water. I'll take my money and buy bottled water. And that's the conversion from public to private.
We move now from a private diversion from within the Great Lakes Basin to a public diversion outside of it. This is the city of Waukesha, Wisconsin, and the 70,000 inhabitants all have the same pressing problem. Their main source of drinking water is contaminated with naturally occurring radium.
Oh no, I don't drink the water. And as soon as we got the information about, well, the radium levels weren't appropriate, we immediately set up getting drinking water delivered.
With its downtown located less than 20 miles as the crow flies from Lake Michigan, Waukesha is naturally looking for a water diversion from the Great Lakes as a solution. However, the city lies outside of the Great Lakes Basin.
So what's really newsworthy about Waukesha is that it is the first community ever to apply for a water diversion under the straddling county exception clause in the compact. So it is really going to be this trailblazer and this precedent-setting case.
Any community within a county that straddles the Great Lakes Basin borderline can request a diversion, but the compact makes sure that approval is very difficult.
Waukesha or any proposed water diversion needs to show that they need the water and that their needs can't be met by either conserving existing supplies or finding another source of water. To put it bluntly, seeking a Great Lakes water diversion needs to be your last and only option left on the table before it's allowed to be considered.
Waukesha's application was approved in June of 2016. The vote was unanimous, as all 8 Great Lakes state governors voted in favor of the water diversion. While the issue of radium has dominated news cycles, Waukesha's problems are allegedly much deeper. As general manager of Waukesha's water utility, Dan Dukniak has been at the center of the city's water crisis for years.
This issue wasn't just about radium, it was about a sustainable water supply. At the time, in 2003, our aquifer was dropping at a rate of 5 to 9 feet per year.
Why?
Because of overuse of the aquifer.
That certainly wasn't the issue when they applied to the Great Lakes Basin to ask for the diversion. They claimed it was the radium.
Waukesha, historically named Spring City, was formerly thought to possess limitless fresh groundwater reserves that were known for their healing properties. But according to city officials like Dan Dukniak, the Spring City is drying up.
What Waukesha has been doing for years is basically pumping more water out of the ground than can be sustained. So the water levels over the last 50 to 100 years have dropped several hundred feet. The deeper that groundwater drops, the more contamination it contains.
Grant Trigger was Michigan Governor Rick Snyder's designate in the decision to approve Waukesha's application.
The governor's office felt it was very important that that review be conducted on a technical basis, evaluating the criteria under the compact, so that the decision would be well-founded.
To help describe the predicament of the deep water aquifer in Waukesha's application, Dan Dukniak cited well monitoring studies from USGS that began in 1932 that measure water levels in that aquifer. Before heavy development, the water level was measured to begin roughly 120 feet below ground. That level dropped reliably over decades of development and population growth to a low of about 490 feet below the surface in 1997. After that, however, the water levels began to rebound. Strangely, USGS datasets are missing from the year 2000 to 2012. Data began to come in again in 2013, and by 2017, the water level has risen about 130 feet, or to roughly the same levels as those in 1973. The Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources has acknowledged that the regional groundwater model, upon which much of Waukesha's application relies, used old data.
The Southeast Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission has an extensive document that they put together that's a water supply plan for the 7 county areas in Southeast Wisconsin. And that was based on information that goes up to 2000 for water supply. And so, yeah, it would be great if we had an update to that for 2015.
And you started seeing other people with radium issues having problems and switching over to Lake Michigan water, like the city of New Berlin. Some of the residents in Brookfield switched. So there were a number of communities that were switching. So all of a sudden you started to see an increase in the levels in the aquifers. The aquifer actually started coming back up.
In order to counter the criticism that the deep water aquifer was perhaps sustainable, the Waukesha Water Commission approved a $40,000 contract with Leggett, Brashears and Graham Incorporated to complete an analysis of the deep water aquifer under the company's senior associate, John Jansen. That analysis was completed 2 weeks later, on November 25, 2015, and submitted with Waukesha's diversion application. On May 18th of 2016, the Great Lakes Compact Regional Body approved Waukesha's diversion application. 1 month later, the application was unanimously approved by the 8 Great Lakes governors.
Wisconsin.
Are you asking for a recess? Mr. Chairman, Wisconsin votes to approve.
Thank you.
That study was done in response to the public comments and was completed after the public comment period was closed, which was a violation of the Natural Resources Standards, Section 281, that required all documents be viewable by the citizens of the state of Wisconsin and First Nations tribes.
Retired HVAC tech and former Waukesha School Board member Steve Edlund has become a community figure in the opposition to Waukesha's water diversion plans.
It had errors, it had omissions, and it was never issued a declaration of findings. It was never peer-reviewed, and this was a scientific document that 7 other states were going to depend on to determine that Waukesha did not have a sustainable source of water. How could you possibly submit that document?
To be able to sit here and say, okay, it's recovered X, so therefore we can predict that it's going to recover more in the future, when the expectation is the population growth and the demand will increase over the next 20 years, seems to be counterintuitive.
What became highly contentious was when they initially proposed this diversion, they requested to add additional communities to their water supply district, and it started to look like kind of an economic growth type of project, rather than just a water supply for people that needed it because their groundwater was contaminated.
Initially in 2010, Waukesha requested 10.9 million gallons of water per day when the city in 2017 only required just over 6 million. That request was a non-starter for many compact states, including Michigan. Waukesha amended its application, instead asking for 8.2 million gallons per day for a smaller service area.
The growth is minimal. This is not about growth. This is about addressing a public health issue.
The water that Waukesha was pumping right now included water from the Great Lakes Basin. When they pumped it out and treated it, they discharged it into the Fox River, which goes into the Mississippi River Basin. For those who were questioning whether a, quote, diversion should be approved, needed to recognize there was an existing diversion ongoing, and in fact it's ongoing today. And that became a sort of a clinching issue at the very end. That is by definition not sustainable.
One stipulation for receiving Lake Michigan water for municipal use is that Waukesha must return 100% of the water it withdraws. To do that, Waukesha has to construct massive infrastructure. 2 sets of pipes, one coming in from Milwaukee, and another set that sends treated discharge down to the Root River and out through Racine.
The settlement that Milwaukee has with Waukesha is obviously going to be beneficial to them economically. Most of the cities are having trouble in just volume sales. Milwaukee was probably at 30, maybe 25% capacity. So, you know, you've got to sell so much water to keep your operations running, or you have to raise rates. And we don't like raising rates on water.
The cost of the project is going to be $285 million, and it's going to be borne by the residents and the businesses and industry that's here in the city of Waukesha. We're anticipating rates are going to double, probably more closely to triple.
In the year 2010, the cost of the project at that time was estimated to be $164 million. At $164 million, they were estimating that the costs of our utility bills would triple. Now this project, and we're talking $285 million. That's insane.
At this point, we haven't discussed having any type of program to help people in regards to paying for the increased cost of water. But we have to have a brand new water supply, not the transportation system for the water, but we need a brand new water supply, and this isn't an option situation. We have to do it.
The people of Waukesha definitely had a problem, and I'm very sympathetic to that. But I don't think they did enough so that they didn't have to divert water from the Great Lakes. Precedent. You don't want to set a precedent for water diversion.
Waukesha's application process has been mired in controversy. But will the controversy end now that one of the 10 most populous cities in Wisconsin has been approved to receive Great Lakes water for municipal use?
It's a very unique case in a very unique circumstance based on a very unique set of facts.
Waukesha was on the minds of the drafters of the compact when they agreed to this document that again had to be passed. You had to pass it in Wisconsin. So you needed some provision for a politically powerful community in the state to agree to allow this legislation to go forward. While it won't satisfy everybody, I think it's a very good middle of the road decision where Waukesha will get the water that they do need, and the Great Lakes will hopefully not see any measurable impact from this withdrawal.
Well, I think the reality is, regarding the whole Waukesha issue, you're going to see one of two things happening. You're either going to see people that are going to come in and say, well, they got it, so I want it, or you're going to see people right outside the compact space who are saying, you know, we've run into some problems, and we have to have this or else.
It's hard to imagine a future in which there will be no further requests for water diversion from those in need, whether they be from close neighbors or distant interests. And in a rapidly growing world afflicted by climate change, inadequate infrastructure, and political upheaval, the debates will continue over who can tap the Great Lakes.
Funding for this program is provided by the Fred A. and Barbara M. Erb Family Foundation, and by
the Consumers Energy Foundation is committed to serving Michigan, from preserving our state's natural resources and sustaining our future, to continuing business growth, academic achievement, and community involvement. Learn more at consumersenergy.com/foundation.
Additional funding by the Richard C. Devereaux Foundation, Eve and Jerry Young, the Polk Family Fund, and by